Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today, we're going to get into the life and crimes of Cesar Barone.
Ooh,
You
okay.
ever heard that name before?
I can't say that I have.
Yeah, he's not as well known as some other serial killers, but this guy's story is pretty messed up.
Okay, well, I'm all ears.
So, Barone was active around Portland in the early 90s.
Okay.
And what makes this case really interesting is that we're not even sure how many victims there actually were.
Oh, wow. So there could be more that we don't even know about.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned being interested in serial killers and their psychology.
Right, yeah, totally.
So this is going to be right up your alley.
I mean, that's one of the things that fascinates me most, like
Yeah.
what makes someone capable of these kinds of acts?
Totally. And with Barone, it's like this whole journey from a troubled youth to this convicted murderer.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning then. Where he grow up, what was his childhood like?
Yeah, so we got to go all the way back to Florida.
Okay.
And this is where it gets interesting. His real name wasn't even Cesar Barone. Yeah, he was born Adolph James Rode.
That's wild. So he completely changed his identity.
Yep. And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Man. Okay, so what happened? How'd he go from Adolph Road in Florida to Cesar Barone, a serial killer in Oregon?
Oh, like a lot of these cases, it starts with a pretty rough childhood.
Huh.
His mom left when he was really young, just a toddler, I think.
Oh, that's got to be tough.
Yeah. And then he was raised by his dad and stepmother, so you can imagine there was probably some instability there.
Right, that kind of early trauma can definitely have a lasting impact.
And the trouble started pretty early for him, too. Like, we're talking criminal behavior at 15.
15. What was he doing at 15?
He actually tried to assault a neighbor,
Oh, wow.
and she was in her 70s, so this wasn't just like, teenage pranks.
Right, there's something seriously wrong there.
Yeah, and from there, it just kind of escalated. Like, typical pattern we see with a lot of criminals, burglaries, assaults, drugs,
Yeah.
alcohol.
Yeah, that downward spiral.
Exactly. By 17, he was already in prison.
Wow. So he was basically an adult by the time he got out.
Yeah, pretty much. But even after he got out, he couldn't stay out of trouble. He even tried to break into his former stepmother's house.
It's like he couldn't escape that cycle of aggression.
Exactly, and that's around when he changes his name to Cesar Barone.
Do you think he was trying to, like, reinvent himself? Like, outrun his past?
Yeah, maybe, but it doesn't really work,
Wow.
He ends up back in prison, and he even assaulted and attempted to rape a female prison guard while he was in there.
Oh, geez. So the name change didn't really change anything?
Nope, still the same guy underneath it all.
So how does he end up in Oregon then? Did he move there after he got out of prison again?
Well, this is where it gets even crazier. He meets a woman in prison, Kathy Scarborough, and they actually get married.
Wait, he got married in prison.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a story in itself.
I know. But eventually they do end up moving to Oregon. But even there, Barone couldn't hold down a job. Old habits die hard.
So what does he do?
He joins the army.
The Army.
Mm.
Really? With his record.
Yeah, I know, it's surprising. And get this, he actually becomes a pretty good soldier. Like, he gets really good at shooting, earns badges in parachuting and first aid.
So was he actually trying to turn his life around?
Mm.
Or was it all just an act?
That's the question, isn't it? He even takes part in the U.S. invasion of Panama, and he claims to have killed a bunch of Panamanians, both civilians and military.
Geez, so he's seen some action.
Yeah, but it all comes crashing down eventually. He ends up getting discharged.
Why? What happened?
Well, officially it was for indecent exposure, but they also found out about his name change and his past imprisonment. So that probably didn't help.
Makes sense. So this is like the turning point then. This is when he goes full serial killer.
Yeah, it seems like that rejection really sent him over the edge.
Okay, so tell me about the murders.
Hmm.
Then we can get into how they caught him.
All right, so between 1991 and 1993, Barone terrorized the Portland area. He targeted women, and like I said before, we're not even sure how many victims there were.
And what kind of women was he targeting? Was there a specific type?
Well, that's the thing. It seems like they were all pretty different ages, from their 20s to their 60s. So there wasn't really a clear pattern.
Wow. So he wasn't just going after one particular type.
Right. And to make it even creepier, they were all from the same general area. Like, he was stalking his prey in his own backyard.
Ugh, that just sends chills down my spine.
Yeah, it's pretty disturbing. But to really understand this guy, we got to dig into the details of his crimes. Let's start with the victims we know about.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
It's important to remember the lives that were lost and the impact these tragedies had.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So who were they? What can you tell me about their cases? So his first confirmed victim was a woman named Margaret Schmidt.
Okay.
She was 65 years old, and she was from Hillsborough.
Hillsborough. Okay, so right in Barone's backyard.
Yep, and this was back in April of 1991. Then, in October of 1992, he killed another woman named Martha Bryant.
Okay.
She was 41, also from Hillsborough. And just 2 months later, in December 1992, he murdered 23-year-old Shanti Woodman.
Jeez, it's like he was ramping up his attacks.
Right. And again, Shanti was from Hillsborough. Then in January of 1993, just a month later, he killed 51-year-old Betty Williams in Portland.
So he finally moved outside of Hillsborough.
Yeah, but it's still the same general area. You know?
Yeah.
It's like he had this hunting ground.
It's terrifying to think about these women just going about their lives and then...
Yeah, I know. And what makes it even more disturbing is that we know he sexually assaulted at least 3 other women during the same time period.
Oh, wow. So even more victims that we know about.
Yeah, and who knows how many more there might be that we don't know about.
Yeah.
You know? It's like this whole other layer of darkness to this story.
Yeah, it really makes you question, like, what goes on in the mind of a guy like this? What drives someone to do these kinds of things?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Hmm.
There are a lot of theories out there, but ultimately it's hard to say for sure what makes someone snap like that.
I guess it's probably a combination of factors,
Right.
right? Like their childhood, their experiences, their mental state.
Yeah, probably. And in this case, we have that added layer of the potential other victims, the ones whose stories we might never know.
It's heartbreaking to think about those families out there who might still be searching for answers.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even when a case is closed, there are often still so many unanswered questions.
Okay, well, let's move on to Barone's capture. How did they finally catch this guy?
So he was arrested on February 27, 1993.
Okay, so just a couple of months after he killed Betty Williams.
Yep. It seems like they were really closing in on him, but the details of his capture are kind of murky.
Really? Like they haven't released a lot of information about it.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Like, you'd think that would be a big part of the story.
Yeah, you'd think so. But anyway, at least they got him. He was sentenced to death in 1995.
Right.
But there's a twist. He didn't actually end up getting executed.
What? So what happened?
He died in prison on Christmas Eve, 2009.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he had cancer and spent his last few weeks in the prison's medical wing.
So he never actually faced the consequences of his actions.
Yeah. It's strange, isn't it? Like, you think about the death penalty and whether it's really justice if the person dies before they can be executed.
Yeah, it definitely raises some questions. And Oregon itself has a pretty complicated history with the death penalty. It's been abolished and reinstated multiple times.
So it's obviously a really divisive issue.
Yep. And this case just adds another layer to that whole debate.
Right. But, you know, before we wrap up, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier. Those potential other victims.
Yeah, what about them?
It's just been on my mind this whole time. Like, did Barone take any secrets to the grave? Are there families out there who will never know what happened to their loved ones?
It's definitely possible. It's a haunting thought, you know,
Uh-huh.
that there might be more to this story that we'll never know.
Yeah, it really makes you think, huh? Like, all these unanswered questions and the ripple effects of these crimes.
Absolutely. It's just tragic all around.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, you know, from Florida to Oregon, from childhood to this really dark period in his life. What stands out to you about Barone? Like, what's the most significant thing we learned?
I think it's that complexity,
Yeah.
you know? Like, this guy had moments where he almost seemed normal or like he was trying to be better. He did well in the military. He had skills.
Right, he wasn't just some mindless monster.
Exactly. But then something clearly went wrong. Somewhere along the line, he just went off the rails.
So it's that nature versus nurture thing again. Like, was he always going to end up like this, or did something push him over the edge?
I mean, it's the question, isn't it? And I don't think we'll ever really know for sure with Barone. It's probably a bit of both.
Yeah, perfect storm of bad circumstances, bad choices.
And maybe some things we just can't explain, you know? Like some people are just wired differently.
Right, and with Barone, we also have that added layer of mystery with those potential other victims. It's just unsettling to think about.
Totally. It's like this case might never truly be closed, you know?
Hmm.
There could be more out there waiting to be discovered.
I guess that's the nature of true crime sometimes. You dig into these cases and you end up with more questions than answers.
It's true.
Ah.
But I think those questions are important, you know? They
Yeah.
keep us thinking. They keep us searching for the truth.
Well said. I think that's a good place to leave it for today. This has been a heavy one, but I always find these deep dives to be so fascinating.
Me too. It's important to confront these dark parts of humanity, you know, to try to understand them, even if it's uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And I hope our listeners out there learned something new today. Maybe even got a little creeped out.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit of chills. Never hurt anyone.
Right. So until next time, Keep those minds curious and keep exploring the world of true crime.
And always remember, lock your doors.
Haha, good advice.